All right. So you want to know about Concorde, right? You want to get to the heart of the story, but you don't want to be bogged down in a ton of endless details.
Right.
And I get it. So
Yeah.
that's what this deep dive is about.
Yeah.
Specifically for this deep dive, we are talking about the Concorde.
Okay.
The
beautiful plane.
that symbol of beauty and speed, right?
Incredible speed. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it really captured the imagination for a lot of people.
Totally.
The idea of this exclusive club that could cross the Atlantic in twice the speed of sound.
Twice the speed of sound.
That's a powerful mystique.
Absolutely. And I think for most people, it really represents a glimpse into a rarefied world of supersonic travel. But the story behind this sleek exterior is actually quite dramatic. Filled with tremendous ambition, some astonishing engineering achievements. And ultimately some tragedy, too. And to kind of unpack this story for you, we've pulled from a variety of different sources. And it all begins with a very specific date, July 25th, 2000.
Okay. A real turning point.
A truly pivotal...
A pivotal moment.
Because we know that 2 Concorde flights were scheduled to leave Paris for New York.
Many of the passengers were German citizens flying over.
Looking forward to that supersonic experience.
To have that supersonic experience. Right?
Yeah, to have that experience. And unfortunately, only one of those flights ever arrived. And for one man, Herman Lear that day was kind of an interesting twist of fate.
Really interesting.
Because owning a Concorde had always been a dream of his, but like an impossible dream, right? Something he just thought he'd never be able to do.
It seemed totally out of reach.
Right, totally out of reach.
Like a utopian dream.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And then fate plays out in this really interesting way. Right. After the Concorde crash, his Technic Museum actually acquires a Concorde.
For €1.
For €1. Like, can you imagine?
And it was flown there by Jean-Louis Chatelain.
Yeah, who described the Concorde.
A very well-respected pilot.
Yeah, as magic.
Magic.
And it was an aircraft that was admired by pilots worldwide.
Right, for the design, for the speed,
the
technology, a real window to the future.
Yeah, and even now, as a legend. It really does captivate so many people.
It does.
And even Herman Lear, to this day, is kind of in awe of the fact that he has a Concorde.
Yeah, on his museum roof.
On his museum roof at the Technic Museum Simchime.
It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, there are long lines of people waiting to see this.
Yeah, just to kind of experience it.
To experience it, to touch it.
To touch it, to see it, to imagine what it would be like.
Right, and just to take in a piece of history.
That's right, yeah. So it's a really interesting story. But the Concorde was also very technically remarkable.
Very much so.
It wasn't just a faster plane than what already existed.
No, it was something. It was built from the ground up to kind of push the boundaries of aviation.
Yeah, and we know that the acceleration, for instance, from takeoff to its maximum cruising speed and altitude was super fast.
Really fast.
Like so rapid.
Very rapid, yeah.
And that it consistently operated at the very edge.
At the very edge of its performance envelope.
Right. And as one source noted, at the Concorde, we can't afford any mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Like the level of precision required in every aspect of this plane's operation.
It's true,
was immense.
Yeah.
So let's picture just a typical full flight from Paris to New York.
Right.
This wasn't just another transatlantic flight.
It was an event.
Right. It was an event.
Yes.
It was an adventure. Right. Especially when you compare it to
the routine
of other air travel.
Yeah.
The check-in, for instance, at Charles de Gaulle was only 50 minutes.
That's amazing, especially today.
Right.
You know?
Unheard of.
Yeah. Back then, it was probably remarkable, too.
Right. But today, unheard of.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was, like I said, it was an event. And we know that they had this Concorde lounge.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they maintained a guest book there. And this guest book was signed by all kinds of...
all the big names.
Huge celebrities.
Jean-Jacques Annault.
Right.
Barbara Streisand.
Yep.
Bruce Willis.
Yeah. And these are just a few.
Apparently, about 1 in 10 passengers were from show business.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was nicknamed the Promi Rocket.
The Promi Rocket. I love that.
The Promi Rocket.
That's a great nickname.
That's my new nickname for it, the Promi Rocket.
Right.
But what was it like, though?
Once you boarded.
What was it like? What?
I mean, the sources describe it as absolute luxury.
Absolute luxury.
Like the sheer rush of speed.
Yeah.
Champagne was flowing.
Caviar.
Caviar being served.
6-course menu.
Like an extravagant 6-course menu.
Yeah.
I mean.
Like real luxury.
Pure indulgence.
Yeah.
But, there's also this misconception that the Concorde was always flying at full capacity.
Yeah, not sure.
Right. And it wasn't always, celebrities and politicians.
Right. It was about 50% full.
Yeah. About 50% occupancy was more typical.
Especially during the week.
Right. Especially during the week.
Yeah.
And although it was luxurious, it also had its unique aspects.
Right.
And one source compares the Concorde to a Ferrari F40.
Okay.
Saying that you paid 10 times the normal fare.
Right.
Not for comfort.
Right.
But for speed.
For speed, that's right.
Right. And that meant dealing with cramped conditions.
Yeah, there was some noise. Vibrations.
Right. It's interesting, right?
That was a trade-off, right?
It was a trade-off.
You were paying for the experience of speed.
That's right. You paid for that speed. And speaking of that speed.
Yeah.
Mach 2.
Yeah, which is twice the speed of sound.
Twice the speed of sound, which puts it in the same performance category as a fighter jet.
Wow.
I mean...
That's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Think about that.
I mean, and here's a really unique thing about the Concorde.
Okay.
Which I just think is wild.
Yeah.
During flight.
Yeah.
The fuselage would actually stretch.
It would stretch.
By about 20 centimeters.
Wow, because of the heat.
Due to the heat?
That's amazing.
And that's why they had, like, gaps.
And they would have a gap appear in the cabin. And apparently, the boarding engineer could briefly insert his hand.
Like, stick his hand in.
Into that gap.
That's wild.
While they were in flight and upon landing.
Yeah.
As the plane cooled.
Yeah.
That 20-centimeter expansion.
It would close back up?
Would close back up.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's wild, right?
It is.
Yeah. And then there's the fact that it was able to sustain supersonic flight for over 2 continuous hours.
Wow.
Which
unprecedented
has never been matched.
Really?
Never been matched.
Wow, that's amazing.
And of course, they couldn't maintain that speed over land because of the sonic boom, right?
Right.
So that breathtaking speed was primarily experienced during the Atlantic crossing.
Okay.
But apparently passengers often didn't even realize when they broke the sound barrier.
Really?
I mean, it was such a unique sensation, effortlessly outrunning the very sound you're creating.
That's incredible.
And reaching Mach 2, that iconic speed, was such a rare experience for most people.
Yeah, very few.
That passengers often felt compelled to take a photograph.
Oh, yeah.
Of the digital display.
Take a picture of the speed.
Right.
Wow.
Very few people have ever traveled that fast.
That's amazing.
But, all of this came about because of some really pioneering efforts to break this sound barrier in the first place.
That's right.
Like for a long time, it wasn't a given.
No.
That sustained supersonic flight was even possible.
No, it wasn't.
And the early history of pushing those boundaries of flight. I mean, it's filled with danger for these test pilots, right?
Absolutely. And sadly, the loss of life.
Right.
It's a risky business.
Right. And it wasn't until 1947 that Chuck Yeager, flying the Bell X-1, finally achieved that sustained supersonic flight.
That's amazing.
And Europe wasn't that far behind.
Right.
In this quest with the British Ferry Delta II.
Yeah, the Ferry Delta II.
Actually playing a significant role.
That's right.
In the design of the Concorde's Delta Wing.
Right. That Delta Wing provided a better lift distribution at those high speeds.
At those high speeds, exactly.
Yeah.
But the real kind of push, the real catalyst for the Concorde was this really unusual 1962 treaty between France and Britain.
Really unusual,
Right, and it's striking because of the level of commitment. Like both governments obligated themselves to jointly develop and build this supersonic passenger plane.
Regardless of cost.
Regardless of cost.
Yeah.
And even more striking is that there was no option for either nation to withdraw.
Wow.
From the project.
So they were in it to win it.
Right. Like that's that kind of international collaboration on a project of this size and scope.
That's incredible, especially back then.
Yeah, really incredible.
Yeah.
And leading this joint endeavor were some incredible individuals.
Amazing pilots.
Yeah, so we had the French test pilot, André Turcot.
Yeah.
and Britain's Brian Trubshaw.
Right.
Who actually...
He flew the royal family.
Flew the royal family.
Wow.
And it's interesting because initially their professional relationship was quite formal and distant.
It was.
You know, you have these two pilots, highly skilled.
Even from different backgrounds.
Coming from different backgrounds, different cultures, different approaches.
Yeah.
And initially they didn't even address each other by their first names.
It was very formal.
Very formal.
Yeah.
But, you know, as the program unfolded.
Yeah. Their relationship changed.
Their relationship changed. Yeah. They had to kind of rely on each other.
They had to. They were in it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that this was a huge project. Managed without a single central authority.
Wow. I can only imagine
the challenges.
It had its own set of challenges, but the French team especially had a real drive to kind of push
the program
forward.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, over in the Soviet Union, they're also fiercely competing.
That's right.
In the supersonic race. They were developing their own
supersonic
jet. The Tupolev Tu-144.
The Tu-144.
Which the West nicknamed.
The Concorde ski.
The Concorde ski, right.
Yeah.
Kind of a fun little...
Right, little playful jab.
Yeah. But the Kremlin's directive was very clear. Like, their aircraft had to fly before the Concorde.
Had to be first?
Had to be first.
Wow.
And they actually achieved that.
Really?
Yeah, so the Tu-144 prototype took to the skies 3 months ahead.
3 months ahead.
Of the Concorde in December 1968.
Wow, that's amazing. So they were first.
They were first, yeah.
But that pressure to be first ultimately led to a lot of compromises in the aircraft's design.
They had to cut some corners.
Yeah. So passengers reported a very uncomfortable experience.
Really?
Like an incredibly loud cabin.
Oh, wow.
And the overall performance was lacking.
Okay.
It struggled to sustain that supersonic speed for very long.
So they couldn't go supersonic for as long as the Concorde.
And it never actually completed
a
transatlantic passenger flight.
Never completed a transatlantic passenger flight. But it still became...
and it still became a symbol.
An icon.
Right, of national ambition.
Yeah, that's interesting how there are these two competing narratives.
Absolutely. So the Tu-144 was first.
Right.
But the Concorde had the advantage.
It sounds so.
In terms of the actual passenger experience.
Yeah, the passenger experience.
Yeah.
Let's turn back to the Concorde's first prototype flight.
Okay.
Which took place in March of 1969 with André Turcat at the controls.
Right.
But that maiden voyage wasn't completely without challenges.
Right.
During that initial flight, which was 27 minutes, the onboard electronics experienced some heating issues.
Oh, really?
Which prompted Turcat to shorten the flight.
Yeah.
As a precaution.
Yeah, makes sense.
But upon its successful landing, there was this huge wave of relief.
Yeah.
And a ton of media attention.
Right. Everyone was watching.
And Turcat, who was typically a very private person, he suddenly became a media star.
Wow. He was thrust into the spotlight.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's really remarkable is the level of enthusiasm for the Concorde initially. Yeah. Like from airlines all around the globe. I mean,
airlines.
They had over 70 preliminary purchase options.
Wow. Placed by some major international carriers.
That's incredible.
Right. So China Airlines.
Wow.
Lufthansa, Pan Am.
Yeah.
Air India, Japan Airlines, like a huge list.
That's amazing.
And there are these great photographs. Of these pilots and flight attendants from all these
different airlines.
Different airlines from all over the world. Right.
Yeah.
All kind of eagerly anticipating the dawn of the
supersonic
age, right?
Yeah.
And to kind of promote that, and to showcase the aircraft, they actually took the second Concorde prototype, on a global promotional tour.
Wow! So it went all over the world.
It went all over the world.
Wow.
They were marketing it with this very optimistic slogan as the best-selling aircraft in the year 2000.
The best-selling aircraft in the year 2000, huh?
And it was met with a ton of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Everywhere it went. Makes sense. People wanted to experience it.
Wanted to see it.
They wanted to see it. They wanted to experience Mach 2. Right. But then there was this sudden shift in public and industry perception.
Yeah. What happened?
I mean, the momentum just started to disappear.
Yeah.
So there was this powerful lobbying effort.
Okay.
that emerged in the U.S.
Right.
And it was representing the interests of the American aircraft industry.
Right.
Who at that point had abandoned their own supersonic project.
Okay.
And this lobby actively campaigned against the Concorde.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Well, I mean, it was seen as a threat.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And suddenly the Concorde was being portrayed as this loud, environmentally damaging thing. You know, and there were these government complaints about the noise.
Right. Even though...
And they pointed out...
military aircraft were making similar noise.
Yeah, military aircraft were making similar noise, but for whatever reason, it was different.
It's different, yeah.
And then 1973 was this really crucial turning point for the Concorde's future prospects.
Right.
Because that's when the global oil prices skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And the Concorde was this gas-guzzling.
It was very thirsty.
Very thirsty plane, right.
Right.
So it became economically unsustainable for most of these airlines.
Right. It was just too expensive to operate.
And so those 77 purchase options dwindled rapidly.
Wow, I bet.
And in the end, it was just Air France and British Airways that proceeded with their original orders.
Right, the two national airlines.
So, despite its groundbreaking technology and initial promise, the Concorde ultimately became this huge economic failure.
Really?
It never established a viable market. And yet, at the same time, it remains this really powerful symbol of successful European collaboration.
Yeah, in large aircraft manufacturing.
It's a real study in contrasts, right?
Absolutely. It's so interesting how it was this amazing technological achievement.
Right.
But it was also this huge economic failure.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the story of the Lear family and their amazing Technic Museum comes in, right?
Right, and Sinchheim.
They had the ambition to acquire both a Concorde and a Tu-144.
Wow.
And they're kind of the pride and joy of their collection.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And Herman Lear himself was really personally interested in placing them at the museum. He even symbolically lowered the Concorde.
That iconic nose.
Iconic nose, right?
Like he was the pilot.
As if he was the pilot.
Preparing for takeoff.
Preparing for takeoff, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
A really evocative image.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work.
Oh, I bet.
To maintain these planes.
Yeah.
Every 2 years, they have to do a major cleaning, which is a huge financial undertaking.
Yeah.
And they have to use 140-ton...
140-ton...
mobile crane.
A mobile crane.
To be able to...
Wow, to get up to...
reach everything, right?
Yeah.
But Alice Schneider, who works at the museum, has been using social media to try to connect with younger audiences.
Yeah, get younger people interested.
Right. Yeah. And apparently these planes are a huge draw.
They are, yeah.
So
people love this.
The Concorde and the Tu-144.
Yeah.
They each have their own fan bases.
Right.
But interestingly, the Concorde gets more positive comments online.
Oh, really?
It's often referred to.
It's like the Queen of the Skies.
The Queen of the Skies.
Right, or the Superbird.
The Superbird.
Yeah.
Whereas the Tu-144 often sparks debates.
About copying the Concorde.
Yeah, about its design.
Right.
So it's interesting. It's like the Concorde has this...
It has this mystical aura.
This mystical aura,
right.
And Alice Schneider mentioned that visitors who have only ever seen pictures of it are often surprised when they see it in person because it's relatively small.
Right.
And it's cramped.
And it was more about speed than...
It was optimized for speed.
Right.
Not spaciousness.
Yeah. Right. And that reality doesn't always...
align with the myth.
Right. Align with the myth.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of this brings us back to that really significant morning.
That fateful morning.
July 25th.
2000. Because there was so much anticipation.
Yeah.
For so many of these German passengers.
They were going to New York.
Who were about to fulfill this dream of flying supersonically to New York.
Yeah.
The demand was so high that they actually scheduled 2 Concorde flights.
Concorde flights.
Wow. And among those booked were Werner and Margaret Dodd Tellman.
Yeah. A German business couple?
A German business couple. They were scheduled to be on the later of the 2 flights.
Okay.
And also booked
were
Gisela and Friedhelm Dreyfus.
Okay.
And Friedhelm especially was so excited.
He wanted to film his dream trip.
To film this lift.